An obvious core facet of existence that to many people it's virtually insane to challenge it. When I say it's attendant characteristics, to the extent that we feel ourselves to be, assume ourselves to be, never question the very sense of separation, then to that same extent we'll probably feel that characteristics like responsibility go with that. If I live a separate life, I'll probably feel that I'm responsible for that separate life. Autonomy, quite possibly, but not necessarily, meaning. If I live a separate life, it's quite likely that I will feel that there is some meaning to that, and if I don't feel that, then I will look for some meaning to it. Responsibility. If there's someone in here that takes actions, then it's a pretty obvious step to then go, I'm responsible for those actions. If there's a me, if there's an I, then I'm responsible for those actions. All sorts of feelings that go with that. Go with the memory of actions that I may have taken in the past that I feel responsible for. Guilt, maybe. Regret. These are what I mean by attendant characteristics. Characteristics attendant on that central feeling that there is a self in here which is separate from what? Well, separate from all other selves. A self, and a separate self here. But actually separate from all other things as well. So the sense that there's a me in here who is autonomous, who is responsible, and moves around inside this other thing called the world, bumping up against other separate selves. It's almost unchallengeable. Some people refer to this as the hypnotic dream of separation. It's like a hypnosis. It's like while we are inside this, it is almost impossible to challenge. Or it may be possible to challenge it intellectually. It may be possible to develop a philosophy that challenges it intellectually. But it's not possible to challenge the feeling here. The feeling seems so obvious, seems so solid. Most individuals, if presented with the idea that there is no separate self at the centre, would simply a range of reactions, but some of the most common ones are complete lack of interest. It's such a ridiculous idea, why would I even be interested in it? Possibly the suspicion that the one who is presenting that idea is suffering from psychosis, maybe, or an extreme case of detachment or something like that. It's so obvious that we live in separation, that there is a separate self in here which lives in separation. Until it isn't. It's completely obvious until it isn't. Let's take the case, there are no rules, but let's take the case where there may be a momentary seeing through that sense of identity inside. This sometimes happens, it doesn't have to happen, but it's reported on often enough to make it at least interesting to just interesting enough to discuss a little bit. Sometimes there is just a split second of seeing that what seems so solid here, what seems to be this solid identity here, is actually empty. And that split second can be enough to completely blow apart the orientation of the individual for whom it's happened, let's say. Just a split second of seeing that what is actually here is emptiness. Doesn't matter how solid it feels until that split second, that what is actually here is emptiness. Just that split second can completely blow apart the concepts of that individual about their life, about the life that they have been leading up to that moment. Because what it reveals is that they don't have a life. What it reveals is that there is no one in here that has a life. Instead of that, what there is there's stuff happening. There's phenomena arising. There's stuff arising out of emptiness. That split second that is reported on sufficiently often to be interesting is the revelation that there's emptiness here, there's emptiness there, there's emptiness, and out of emptiness everything arises. Everything arises and it falls away. A glass of water arises and falls away. A rose arises and falls away. Each apparent moment arises out of nothing and falls away. And there's something about this bundle of perceptions here that weaves that into a very convincing story of separation, time, past, future, cause and effect, meaning, responsibility, autonomy, and many other things that go with that. So it can be a tremendous shock when all of that is blown apart, let's say, in a split scene of a split scene of emptiness. The Buddhists describe this as empty phenomena rolling by. Empty phenomena rolling by. Empty phenomena rolling by out there. But empty phenomena rolling by in here as well. This is also empty phenomena rolling by. It's ungraspable until it's seen. And because it's ungraspable until it's seen, the mind, if it does become interested in this, because some minds do, the mind turns incredible somersaults trying to grasp it. The mind gets very frustrated by not being able to grasp them. The mind understands things, that's what it does. I'm using this word very loosely. Later on this afternoon we'll probably come back to this and declare that there is no such thing as a mind, but just go with this for the moment, for the sake of a moment. What does the mind do pretending that it exists? The mind understands things, it understands the world. Aha, here is this. What is it? Is it a concept? Is it a sensation? Is it a feeling? Is it an idea? This notion, let's call it, that there's emptiness here, but there's no one at the centre. And the natural thing for the mind to do then is to try to understand it. And the more it fails to understand it, the more complex the story about it that it creates. And so you end up on top of the simplicity. Nothing could be simpler than seeing that there's just emptiness. I mean, there is nothing simpler than that, I'm going to declare. Somebody might say, what about a vacuum? Well, in a way, we're talking about a vacuum. Nothing could be simpler than seeing that everything arises out of emptiness, that there is nothing at the centre, and everything arises out of that. Because the mind can't understand it, it turns it into huge complexity, huge complexity. I was watching somebody for a few minutes yesterday on the internet talking about self-inquiry. It was mind-bogglingly complicated. Mind-bogglingly complicated. Even the few minutes that I watched, there were all these different levels and all these different ways of seeing and all these subtleties, and the mind had to do this and the mind had to do that, and on and on and on, and after about 8 minutes I switched off with a sick headache. Nothing could be simpler than this. The problem with this is that the mind can do nothing with it. What can the mind do with seeing that there is emptiness? Out of that, everything kind of magically flows. That's a dangerous word to use, magically. But it'll do. Flows in a way which the mind cannot possibly understand. But that's as good a definition of magic as any. Some phenomena the mind can't understand. Somebody pulls a rabbit out of the hat. This is the ultimate rabbit, being pulled eternally out of the cosmic hat. It's so simple and it's so impossible to understand. And we live with this paradox. Until it stops feeling solid, this feels so solid. Feels so solid until it doesn't. And yet, well, having mentioned self-inquiry, bang on about that, but nevertheless, no matter how much we look into this, we never find the place from which this solidity appears. It seems so solid as long as we're living in separation. It seems so solid until it seems empty. Excuse me. It would be the afternoon we're being filmed that the mobile didn't get switched off. And I very strongly suspect that's somebody who wants to help me make a claim on my payment protection insurance. Either that, or a claim for the neck injury I sustained in the car accident that I've never had. One or the other of those. Did I actually even turn it off there? Yes, I did. So we live with this paradox. It can become incredibly painful, in fact, this paradox. We live with this paradox that we feel so solid, we feel the self is so real, and yet no matter how much we look inside, we will never find the one from whom all of the phenomena arises. We'll never find the one who has feelings. We'll find feelings, but we'll never find the one who has feelings. We'll find thoughts, but we'll never find the one who is thinking. We won't find the one who is feeling, or the one who is thinking, or the one who is perceiving. We'll find perceptions. In fact, unless we're in dream sleep, there are always perceptions, but we'll never find the one who is perceiving. And there's this terrible paradox, and the paradox is resolved when it's seen that the reason we can't find the one who is feeling, the one who is thinking, the one who is perceiving, because they don't exist. Another way to put this, if you like, is that we are perceiving, we are thinking, we are feeling, we are not a self who thinks, who perceives, who feels. We are, if you like, the totality of the flow of perceptions. The metaphor that's often used of a river. We are the flow of the river. So we may set out on this incredibly frustrating task of finding the one who is within. We'll never find them because there isn't a self within. Set out on the path of self-inquiry. And as long as there's a sense of a person who is trying to discover that they're not a person, then that won't get us to his either. And yet, at any moment, pretending that there are moments, that sense can just dissolve. It can just be gone. Maybe go on for half a second, but that will completely transform what's perceived after that. Not that what's perceived after that will change, but that it's known that there is no one perceiving it. What often happens there, even in just a split second of seeing, just a split second of emptiness, after which the sense of separation may come back, what usually happens is that the stories of meaning that have run our life up to that point will tend to be destroyed, will tend to be shattered. Because the stories of meaning that run our life exist in time, they exist in cause and effect, and they are meaningful because they're meaningful for a person. Without a person there, they become meaningless. All the different stories of salvation, for example, well, when there's no person to be saved, they will become meaningless. All the stories of spiritual evolution and advancement, and when it's seen that there is no one to evolve or become spiritually advanced, then they just disappear in a puff of smoke. A lot of those stories are fueled by our tendency to project onto figures out there that which we reject in ourselves. I was watching the other day a documentary, some of you might have seen it, by Louis Theroux. He took a trip through India going to various gurus. And there was a lovely segment where he was with the Hare Krishna people in India, and the current head of the Hare Krishna is American, big, quite impressive American. And Louis was interviewing him in his usual way. He came across very well, this chap, I thought. Very nice chap. And the people around him were filming him, touching his feet, hanging on to every word, chanting, quieting themselves. Devotion, devotion, devotion. And Swami himself seemed a little bit, it seemed like it was something he felt he just had to put up with, because this is what people do. He didn't really want people touching his feet. And so Louis then interviewed one or two of these devotees, mostly Westerners. And there was such a hunger in the story, for spiritual advancement, and such a belief that this figure here, because he somehow has something spiritually that we don't have, he can transfer this to us, we can get this from him. Such a powerful projection of what is in us onto this external figure. Such an admiration of him. Such a, probably at some point down the road, maybe an inevitable disappointment, perhaps. And all of that can just be gone. There's so much story in that, and all of that can just be gone in a flash. The recognition that there is neither anyone in here nor anyone in the Swami. It's just empty phenomena. They're just empty phenomena arising out of nothing and falling away again. And so it's likely, although not definite, because nothing is definite, that even a split second of seeing will entirely transform how this is experienced. Not necessarily for the better, not necessarily for the worse, but entirely transform it. No self here, no person here, therefore no path to follow, no story to unfold, no evolution that's needed, no God to please, just the magnificence, eternal unfolding of this. Always just this. When was there ever a moment that wasn't this? When will there ever be a moment that isn't this? So it doesn't matter how long the hypnosis lasts. You can just be drunk just like that, and just end just like that. And then after that, life goes on. It's just seen that no one is living it. You may not. But it's seen that no one's doing it. Life just goes on at the moment.
there a sense of relief with that? No.
There are no rules. But very often there is. And relaxation. And a falling away, quite possibly, but not inevitably, of certain neurotic characteristics, let's say. And whether there's relief or not might depend on how the story of the person has been constructed before that. Because if there's been a lot of desperate searching, as there may well be in a lot of cases, then yes, there can be relief that that's falling away. But if there's been a complete commitment, let's say, to the sense and the belief that there is separation and this is meaningful and I am on a path somewhere, it could be any path, but I am on a path somewhere. You know, my life had a beginning, it's going to a conclusion which is meaningful, which is in some sense progressive or evolutionary. And it might not be relief, it might be despair for a while. That could also happen. Anything.
Last slide here, you mentioned that liberation is a random event. Liberation being a random event was a story. But didn't quite understand that. It's something that just happened. So would you say it's not random then? But true.
But what the mind wants to do, wants to get a grasp on this. The only way it can get a grasp on this is somehow construct a story.
Yeah.
Right? And somewhere in that story, very central, is going to be, okay, well, this must be about something. The mind lives in cause and effect, so this must be about something. Right? Cause and effect must be relevant here, even if it's only relevant by its absence. Right? So what the mind, if you like, one of the things the mind can do is set up a number of alternatives and say, well, it's got to be one of these alternatives, right? So, for example, liberation is earned by spiritual purity. Liberation is earned by devotion to the Guru. It's grace, right? It's conferred by grace. Liberation is the result of a progressive path involving committed effort. Right? Liberation is a random event. Right? Liberation is to do with karma. Now we could go on listing until notionally at least we could have covered every possibility, at which point the nicest point, we've covered all the possibilities there, so it's got to be one of those or a selection of them. So which is it? They're all stories. They're all attempts by the mind to create a meaning out of all that exists, which is this, just this. Not even a moment, just this. The mind adds past, future and story to that. And then it will go off and create, who knows what's out of that, if the mind got that, oh well, this is random. But the thing to do with that is to go off and start doing things that make it more likely that randomness will occur. If it's got the randomness of a lightning strike, then the thing to do is to go and stand under a church spire with a lightning detector on the top of it in a storm. And the mind is an incredibly mischievous monkey, and there is nothing it can't construct a story out of. And so, if the mind hears, well, no, is this cause? No, it's not cause. Oh, well, it's random then. No, it's not random. Well, it must be one of those or something else. Because the mind's thinking in terms of causality and time. And as long as you're within that, it makes total sense to say that it's random or it's caused. Or it's earned through devotion, or it's the grace of God, or whatever. What we're confronted with here is there is just this. There's just this. Not even a moment. So we're talking about, we're outside time. So we're outside cause and effect. And even more frustrating to the mind as we sit here and perhaps we go to other meetings and we read books, we watch clips on YouTube about liberation, is when the voice from out here says, and we're talking about something that doesn't exist. Is liberation a random event? No. Why not? Well, partly because there's no such thing as liberation. But what are we talking about here? That's so frustrating.